need to know the how.
Where we are at the moment, we will be fools as a country to continue keeping children outside and creating imaginary fear.
And if these adults are okay, and with thorough consultation, we may then bite the bullet.
So, Joe,
there you are.
Imaginary fear, I doubt there is imaginary fear. We do not know, and as Jamila has illustrated, with the cases out there, the numbers are still going up. So we can't call that imaginary fear. There are places where schools have closed. They have gone back to lockdown because of rise in cases. And then we have CS Magoa saying, biting the bullet. He knows it's a bullet. It's going to be very, very difficult. I think the next few weeks we'll have to just watch the trends, watch the numbers, because government can do a lot of things, but I doubt they can force parents to take their children to school if they don't feel those kids will be safe.
But I also think there's something more to this whole story, in the sense that I think that looking at how this virus has presented itself in different places, I think it's so important that every country by now, 7 months later or more, have kind of figured out certain things about how this thing is behaving. Because look, there was a time that we thought that this thing was going to be so bad in places like Kibra, and we needed perhaps to lock them down. And we did not, because in Kibra they cannot do social distancing and those kinds of things. So what are the lessons that have been learned from, for example, Mukuru, Kwanjenga, Kibra, and all of these things that can help in, for example, reopening schools safely? Because we know for a fact, I mean, if you look at some of those guidelines that have been given, if that is what we are going to depend on to reopen schools, we will never reopen schools. Because look,
how many are going to meet those guidelines?
How many extra classrooms can we get?
Right.
How can we do that social distancing thing in schools and effectively get away with this? We're talking about, I don't know what kind of hand washing things and some things that some schools don't even know where water is, and
to begin with.
You understand? So we have to figure out ways in which we can safely reopen schools at some point without relying on examples from elsewhere, but trying to find homegrown lessons that we have got from the different scenarios that we've dealt with over the last 7 months. I think that's the only way that we're ever going to get this thing going.
Indeed, and CS Magoha actually said that, at that parliamentary committee, he said, there cannot be any social distancing that can be practiced at schools. And I think there's some interesting things they're going to grapple with. So number one, these are children who've been at home. They've been in the safety of their homes, and now you're sending them out into the world and to start practicing all of these guidelines that the adults have been getting used to, social distancing, putting on masks, and that sort of thing. So you're actually now sending them out into the world. So that's an interesting thing. But I think also, like you said, Joe, homegrown solutions, this comes at a very interesting time in Kenya particularly. Remember, we're in the process of a transition from one system of education to another, and that is CBC. And so now we're at grade 4, I believe. And remember, quite a bit of the training of teachers is something that is happening. It is ongoing. And remember, with grade 4, they only had 9 weeks of teaching the curriculum, and then, everything stopped. So for us, there's also going to be some unique issues that we need to deal with, like training of those teachers. So where do we begin the term? They were not well versed with the curriculum and the syllabus and what that is like. So do we begin? Where do we pick that up from? Remember, they've lost literally the whole year. I think there's also the other issue of understanding how much money has been sent to the schools already to just enable them to start to prepare for that. There's going to be, I suspect, a huge influx of students from private schools back to public schools. This is because we've heard many, I think over 130 private schools that will never reopen. They have completely closed shop, moved on to other things. So there will be some interesting new dynamics and numbers that they're going to have to start to deal with in the public versus the private. And then what happens to those in private schools who were candidates? in these registered exam centers, and those schools are now no longer functional. There is so much to think about, and like you say, that is very specific to the country. I think that they're going to have to deal with, and interesting to see how much of the COVID funds were actually taken to the education sector to enable them mitigate the challenges and to enable them get ready for the reopening. So there's just, quite a few questions I think that we have to answer, but I think, like the CS said, it's going to happen over time, and that's why you see the phased reopening, first starting with the adults, right? So you start with the universities, the TVETs, the tertiary institutions, see how that goes, and then before you move to the basic level of education.
Joe, what I think the COVID-19 situation has done to us as a country is to expose the level of, infrastructure inadequacies across the country in terms of health, in terms of education, and many other facets. I mean, it is during this COVID-19 that we realized that some counties had no ICU facilities. This is the season we realized that some counties, if you had, let's say, 10 people involved in a road accident and they required critical care services, they would not get. They would have to be ferried to Nairobi or elsewhere. This is what COVID-19 has done to us. It is also the same COVID-19 that has exposed the level of infrastructure development in our schools. I was speaking to a relative of mine who sits in a board of a public primary school, and he was telling me that they have done computation. Looking at the number of students in their schools, per class, they have between 60 and 70 students, pupils, that is. So they had done computation, and they require at least 24 classrooms if they were to comply with the social distancing guidelines that were earlier issued. So 24 classrooms. Has money been allocated to that public primary school to construct 24 classrooms? CDF, he was telling me, can only afford them 2 classrooms. 2. So it means there's a deficit of about 22.
And so what happens to those schools that don't meet the guidelines? Do you not reopen them?
Then another friend of mine who is a teacher in a public secondary school, which is a boarding school, was telling me that they had to convert some of their rooms to dormitories, And you can now imagine, if you were to issue the social distancing guidelines and comply with them, then they will require to construct dormitories, construct maybe another dining hall, construct classrooms, and so on and so forth. And add on to that, you need more teachers, because it is not enough to construct classrooms and dormitories, because who will teach these students who are in extra classrooms? So all these discussions must be done in such a way that everybody, every stakeholder is involved. And then also, lastly, the confusion that has been in the education sector insofar as COVID-19 is concerned. When we were told by the CS in charge of education that consider this a lost year, so many people relaxed. In fact, wengine wakakula school fees. So when you tell them to take their
Even
school...
government.
Even government.
At Agava, I think it also ate their school fees. So you can now imagine telling them to go back to classrooms, and they are wondering where they'll get money from. And many of them are genuine, because people lost job opportunities. Yeah. I mean, businesses went down and so on and so forth. So it is a discussion that is not just about reopening schools and taking kids back to school. It's a deeper discussion than probably it seems.
Here is a text from a teacher who is watching, head teacher in a school I don't have to mention, but says that the school needs 20 more classrooms.
See?
And 2 new big dormitories to fit 350 girls. So,
and you see,
and says that, they are not ready unless the CS says there is no corona.
No, but and we're not like money. Rwanda, by the way, that has started implementing a plan to build 22,505 classrooms in all 30 districts of the country. So,
but no, the other thing also I think is this. You see why I was talking about a homegrown approach to this thing. Look, there are counties, for example, where the incidence of COVID-19 has not been as high as, and there are places where there have hardly been any cases. So the kind of guidelines you have for those places surely have to be different from counties where you've had a lot of these things. If it's a day school where everybody lives there, It's different if it is, a school where people have come from different parts of the country. But if it's a village school in a county where there has never been any serious issues with COVID-19, then you really need to talk about how do we make sure that these schools reopen, and then whatever resources need to provide additional infrastructure is for a moment concentrated in counties where this thing has been very serious.
Right.
Those are the kinds of conversations that have been going on, because we can't just keep talking about this every day, every week, and you don't see light at the end of the tunnel. Because the CS yesterday, when he was speaking in Parliament, he said that they have a plan to make sure that the year is not really lost, that they'll still catch up with whatever the kids were supposed to have covered during this 7-month period. Now that will require some serious planning, some serious strategy, and so you can't just do it by copying and pasting from different places. It really, I have to insist, has to depend on what we have been dealing with here.
We have the school in Wiki where they have 3,551 students, I think 41 classes. For them to be able to adhere to the proposals here to ensure that COVID-19 does not spread in that school, they need about 140 classes. The school is on land of, I think, 86 meters by 87 meters, and they're supposed to have 140 classes, so that they're able to accommodate the 3,551 students who go there. It's a big problem.
Shall we end this?
Yes.
And tonight we start with
with you.